Hey, hello everyone. Welcome. So happy to have you here this evening um, for the Connected Classroom, Fostering Relationships for Deeper Learning. We're just going to wait a few minutes for some other folks to trickle in, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. And I think I recognize Sue. I recognize you from last night, and I think you've been to some other webinars, which is fantastic. So welcome back, Sue. Thanks for being here. All right, well, 6:03, so we could probably get started. Excuse me, and we'll keep letting folks in as they arrive. Welcome everyone. It's so lovely to have you here this evening for our webinar, The Connected Classroom: Fostering Relationships for Deeper Learning. Let's get started. So, we'd love to know a little bit about you. And again, Sue, I know that you've been here a few times, so I'm glad you're with us again. And if you wouldn't mind just continuing to participate in the chat box, we would love it. So we would love to know where you're zooming in from, how old is your child or the children you work with, and then one hope you have for this webinar. So one thing you're hoping to gain from our time together this evening. And I'll give the chat, about a minute or so. And again, if you're on your cell phone, no worries about chiming in on the chat. We understand that some folks are even in the car or anything like that, so no worries. Okay, Lanisha, thank you so much. So zooming for proximity, 6-year-old son, and what you consider a connected classroom. Fantastic. And Andrea's zooming in from Bergen County. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, all right, we'll just wait another minute. Okay. So let's continue on. If you want to continue to add your information into the chat, we'd love to know a little bit more about you and also have the folks from the webinar interact with you. But a little bit of an intro. Oh, and Sue, thanks for chiming in. 6, 9, and 11 from Cranford, how to connect with staff when you aren't able to see what's happening on a daily basis. Would love to be a fly on the wall. Oh my gosh. Yes, Sue, totally. And don't we all? And we're so lucky to have a principal here with us tonight to give us some tips. So it sounds like there's some folks who are coming from a classroom space and maybe some folks who are coming from a parent perspective. And so we hope that this webinar will help with both. So just a little bit about who I am. My name is Erica Brenton. I have been an educator for over 20 years now. I started my career as a New York City public school teacher, and I saw what an impact social emotional learning had on my students, had on me. And so I went into the field of social emotional learning, where I think I would consider myself now a specialist. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, with my husband and two children. I have a middle school student and an elementary school student, and we just got a puppy. So I put him in our family, and he's taking up all my time and energy. And in my free time, which I don't have a ton of, but I like to go on long walks and I like to read and spend time with my family. So it's lovely to see you here tonight. And I'm going to pass the screen over to my colleague, Mr. Jeff Freeman, who's going to introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. As Erica said, Jeff Freeman. This is my 27th year in education, and I say I've been pretty fortunate. All 27 years have been in the Montclair Public School District. We've been in the headlines a little bit lately. However, a lot of great things happening. A lot of great things happening in Montclair. I started out my career here as actually did my student teaching, and then as an ELA teacher for grades 9 through 12. I had an opportunity to be the lead teacher of a small learning community, the Center for Social Justice, and then an assistant principal at the high school. And then the wonderful opportunity presented itself to be the principal at Edgemont Montessori, K-5 elementary school, where Eric and I, we crossed paths. And then the high school principal spot opened up, and I came back home. I say all that to say very fortunate to have the experience, somewhat backwards though, high school first and elementary and back to high school, which has been very helpful and be able to form, how I view education and instruction. Additionally, I've trained in restorative practices myself. I have two kids, two daughters, one in high school, a 10th grader, and then one who's in the second year in college. And in my free time, which I'm looking forward to the break, to catch up on some reading. Um, Catch up on some reading. I also love to bake. I'm the baking club advisor. When this was in the Board of Education minutes, I started getting many emails saying this must be a mistake. How are you the baking club advisor? But it's just one opportunity, another opportunity for me to connect with my students, and then also at home, love to do DIY projects. That to do list has grown, and I thought it was kind of on a halt right now, but there are a couple of projects, primarily outside, but we're moving them inside because of the weather. So I'm looking forward to being on the call and to share my perspective. Not saying it's it's what it is or I'm the expert in that, but just my experiences over the last couple of 27 years in my different roles. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And one of the reasons that we brought Jeff on for this call is because he is so fantastic at building relationships and connecting with parents and staff and students. So we're looking forward to hearing more from him in just a moment. Just wanted to share our agenda for this evening and just some of the hopes that I have for you to walk away with. So we'll just get a little bit into research, like why is relationships important in schools? And we know it feels good, but what is the actual research saying? We'll look at a video that shows us relationships in action in a school community and at home with parents. We'll hear from Jeff more about what his suggestions are for building relationships in the school community. Then we'll talk a little bit about something called core values and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that, get into that in a moment, and then we'll close out. So I really hope that you'll be able to walk away with a better understanding this evening of how relationships affect learning, and that you could use these strategies right away with your students, or if you are a parent, that you could use these in connection with your school community. So lots of practical tools to come in a little bit. Oh, I always like to set the foundation with a quote, and I love this quote: "Children are like flowers; they grow toward the light." And so, oftentimes, right, we're the light. We're the ones creating these environments for them and creating the right conditions for them and doing what we need to do for our kids. And so, I thought this was a really beautiful quote to start with. So I'm going to talk a lot about research right now. I hope it's not too boring, but I think it's so interesting and important just to share like why relationships have an impact on students and school. And so what we found is that the students in social emotional learning programs actually score higher, 11 percentile points higher than their peers. And they have higher grades, higher test scores. And so when your child is in a strong social emotional learning program, you can have an expectation that they're not only going to do well social emotionally, but also academically. Strong school and home relationships are linked to greater motivation and engagement, and that kids who feel connected actually experience less stress and build resilience. And so this is all from a meta-analysis of over 270,000 students, excuse me, that was done in 2011. So really interesting. So relationships protect kids, connections that students feel with their parents, their teachers, their peers is actually linked to lower stress, anxiety, and depression. And that social emotional learning programs lead to fewer behavior problems and improved classroom climate. So we see the benefits with the whole school community, and that students report a stronger sense of safety and belonging at school when they're in social emotional learning programs. And this all comes from a global study that was done across 50 countries. In 2017. So another, interesting piece of research here. And that the SEL benefits don't just fade, there's a lasting impact. So they can last months and years after these programs end. and that kids who build strong SEL skills are much more likely to graduate, find stable jobs, and avoid risky behaviors as adults. So, what happens with a lack of school belonging? So, we just talked about all the benefits of positive school belonging, but there's actually a lot of research that shows that students who have a lack of school, a lack of sense of school belonging, are more associated with increased risk for mental illness, antisocial behavior, increased risk of physical illness, and early mortality. And then going even further, in 2024, there was a study done by the Aspen Institute. And again, this was, after COVID and after the pandemic. So a lot of things happening, a lot more technology, a lot more social media. So none of this seems very surprising. But they found that close to 40% of US high school students actually don't feel connected to their school, and only 55% of young people feel connected to people at their school, with LGBTQ plus students and those with disabilities and students of color actually faring the worst. And so what they found was actually that these students don't necessarily reject school as a whole, but what they do reject are the curricular and school structures that really are failing to engage many students. And so tonight, we hope that we can present to you some ways and some school structures and curricular structures that actually promote engagement and promote connection. And so we'll get into those in a few minutes. What I want to do now is I'm going to transition us a little bit, and we're going to watch a super quick video because I think it's really important for people to see like what relationships actually can look like, because we can say, oh, it's great to have positive relationships, but what does that look like? What does that sound like, both in the school and at home? So I'm going to toggle my screen here real quick. And sorry. And we're going to watch a super quick video. And I just want you to think about, as we watch this video, it's only 3 minutes long. What are some of the impressions that you're taking away? What are some of the things that you notice? Um, any ahas when we watch this video? So let me make my screen a little bigger here. And uh, okay. All right, let's get started.
Child's future ability to succeed in the workplace, become a leader, and achieve long term happiness will depend in no small part on their ability to build positive relationships. Students who learn to communicate clearly, cooperate with others, and constructively negotiate conflict are well on their way to future success.
We've talked about self-awareness, which is understanding yourself, and then social awareness, understanding others. So getting into relationship skills is really then, okay, now you're interacting. I'm not just standing over here thinking, I wonder what you're feeling. I wonder what you're thinking. I'm actually using that information to engage.
In the classroom, there are lots of opportunities for kids to work together in pairs, to work in small groups, to work in large groups, so that they can actually practice this. So we can intentionally teach them explicitly, how do you disagree? How do you agree? How do you be respectful in giving your opinion? How do you take on an active role on a group project? So sometimes before you actually engage kids with a group, you talk a little bit about, what are you going to do if one person is doing more than their share of work? How are you going to respond when one person doesn't seem to be contributing? What are the different roles that we have as part of this group? Who's going to be taking notes? Who's going to be making sure we stay on task? Who's going to be keeping time? Who's going to make sure that the conversation keeps moving? So we can actually teach kids how to be productive members of a group and give them lots of opportunities in every class to work in groups.
You've probably heard quite often the idea of project-based learning or problem-based learning. And so that's not just your typical project, we're going to build something together. It's actually thinking about, okay, let's take our learning and apply it to a real world problem. And then as a group, we're going to solve that. And it's a wonderful way because kids are learning content, they're learning standards, but they're also learning relationship skills. How do we work together? How do we decide who does what role? How do we figure out when we're successful? What if we make a mistake? What if we don't agree with someone? How do we navigate that?
It's important to build relationship skills with your children because it does foster trust. When kids feel that they can come to you and they can talk to you about anything, they're less likely to go to their peers and get the wrong answer sometimes. but it's important to play games with your children. I think sometimes as parents, we get so focused on the day-to-day tasks that we forget to have fun. For example, it can be reading a book or watching certain TV programs or going to the movies or going bowling, things that will bring you together and bring you out of your comfort zone. I think sometimes it's easy to just kind of fall into a routine in the system and just think, hey, we're together and that's okay. But it's important to spend time and be very specific about how you spend time so that that time allows for communication.
We want to have healthy relationships with our partners, with our children, with our friends. We know that a social network and positive relationships helps us mitigate against stress, against illness. It increases our longevity. Positive relationship skills are critically important.
Any impressions you had of the video? Let's get this back up here. Or anything you noticed. I can share a little bit about what I noticed and what I thought was impactful. I thought, first of all, it was really amazing to see kids interacting with each other without screens. And so I noticed both in the family examples and also in the classroom examples that kids were like actually speaking to one another. They were working together. They were problem solving together. They weren't on their devices. And so if that's something that you find in your classroom or your kids' school communities, you can always ask, you know, what are ways that kids are working together? How are kids problem solving together? What are they doing off screen? So I thought that that was a really interesting thing. And then the other thing I loved was that the woman saying that oftentimes we can just get very caught up in our daily routines. And so it's so important to like build in time for relationships. After watching this video, I have done more intentional relationship building with my own kids, like playing games and doing things that are outside of our routine because we could get so stuck in that routine. So yeah, any impressions you had of the video would be fantastic to hear in the chat. I'll just hold the chat open for like 30 seconds or so, and then I'm gonna pass it on over to Jeff. All right, no worries. Oh, thanks, Jeff. The concept of project-based learning. Yeah. Project-based learning is such a wonderful way to get kids to really not only like access their own curiosity and interests, but really is just such a way of interacting and working together. So thank you for sharing. Okay. Oh, and Gary, thank you. Having fun with your kids is so important for the child and for you. Yes, I love that you mentioned the idea of actually having fun. I think sometimes that's something we often forget to do as educators, as parents, right? Like, where is that fun piece? And those kids look like they were really having fun in that video. So thank you for pointing that out as well. Okay, I'm going to move it on over to Jeff here, who's going to share with us some ideas of how to actually build those relationships. So let's, Jeff, it's
All right,
handing it over to you.
Thank you. So, and I just want to just briefly revisit some of the information, some of the stats in those earlier slides that talk about the importance and the why we have to do relationships. And I just couldn't agree more. I believe that, you know, relationships, the importance of it, there's a direct relationship to student achievement, student success in schools, and then most importantly, life beyond the school. I think those important skill sets that they can develop, whether it's with the peer-to-peer, teacher to student relationships, are extremely important. So in terms of relationships, one of the things that I always communicate with my staff and to get them to believe and to create this culture and mindset that relationships aren't extra, right? That's not something we have to do that's extra. It's one of the core values. It's to me, and what I say to them, it's just as important, or I would even go as far as to say more important than the curriculum and the instruction. And I think there are for many reasons why. In my high school, I think that there are some teachers who are brilliant, and they may teach those higher level AP courses, and they just want to make sure they're getting through the material. And I have to oftentimes slow them down to say, yes, the curriculum is important, but most importantly are the relationships. So I say that to say, so relationships, when we talk about three different ways, I'll be talking about teacher-student relationships, peer-to-peer, and then the school-family relationships. And again, this is the foundation for student success in the school system, as well as, life beyond schools. We want them to be productive and successful members of society. Additionally, we know that, with the data suggests that has a very positive, huge impact on student learning, engagement, and well-being. Relationships help to create an environment where students want to feel a part of, right? And they want to be there. They want to be able to interact and engage with their peers, which again is something that provides a very rich experience for our students when they're in our schools. Next slide. Okay, so first set of relationships, teacher-student relationships, key. I think one of the primary reasons why they're so important is because, as it says, it builds trust and emotional safety, right? And this is something that's done day one, right? Day one at the high school, and even, at the elementary school before school starts, when you're sending out that first letter that talks a little bit about the teacher and, their expectations and how they're excited to meet with them. But in the high school setting, day one, I think that is very important. One of the things that teachers can do to help to begin to foster relationships is to make sure that they're learning their students' names, right? So you may think that this is something very simple, easy, but it goes a long way. Not only learning their names, but making sure that we're pronouncing them properly. And then the other thing that in my building is also their preferred pronouns. We have some students who may identify, have different pronouns. And to them, it means a great deal. And when staff members are able to correctly, address them with their proper pronouns, that goes a very long way. The other thing that teachers can do at the high school day one, or even begin to do to help foster these relationships with their students, something as simple as greeting students at the door during passing time. And what that allows is to check students' body language, their energy, as they're coming into their classrooms, right? And to gauge, something seems a little bit off with Jeff today. Maybe I might pull him aside just to check in to see how he's doing, right? Even to greet them, ask them about their sporting events. Hey, how'd you do in the game last night? And better yet, if you can attend the game, if you can attend the performance, if you can attend the play, just to see how they were doing and follow up. These are things that teachers can do that will help to develop the relationships. Additionally, one of the things, again, talking about this math teacher who's very famous in school, Calc 3. One of the things, and I happened to be in the classroom that I saw, and it went a long way when we talk about academic vulnerability. And by that, he shared how when he was in a certain class, he struggled a little bit, and this is how he was able to overcome, right? I think it's important for students to know that we too are humans, right? And that we also, there are some struggles, but we were able to overcome and persevere. And even if, normalize making mistakes and because everyone's not perfect. I think sometimes students come in thinking that this is what it has to be. I have to be perfect all the time, which puts this added pressure and stress on the students, and sometimes it can result in behaviors that we don't necessarily want. But I think one of the most important things for teachers is that they have to be intentional, right? Erica, you spoke earlier about how being intentional with how you create relationships and certain things you do with your own children. I think this is the same here. Teachers have to be intentional, and something as simple as a check-in during the do now that allows the teacher to be a part of that check-in. When I was in the classroom, when I had to do now as an ELA teacher, I would also share out. So students got a little peek into my own life to see what I did outside of the building, right? Because these are things that they're curious, they want to know. And I think when teachers are intentional and do these small, but I'm going to say small but high impact moves, right? They begin to develop these relationships that go a long way. Which is very supportive because the students will want to feel a part of this class, and they feel safe taking the academic risks, which we want our students to be curious, right? I always say we want to promote intellectual curiosity. And this is something that when they have this trust and emotional safety in the classroom with this teacher, these are things that they're going to do. Okay. So that's relationships in schools. Next slide, please.
All right,
I
and
mean,
Jeff, I just wanted to point out
sure.
that Sue shared that she thought it was a good point about the names and the pronouns. So that I just want to share that feedback. That was a
Yes,
great,
and that goes a
great idea.
long way.
Yeah.
We've even had some students who may go by a different name than their birth name. And what I think is important is for teachers to go in to their roll books or their information system, and they have the ability to put their preferred name in as well. And I think honoring that also goes definitely a long way. So I think pronouns, their preferred names, all of those, and just really knowing their names and making sure that we're pronouncing it correctly. And if we aren't certain, let the student say, "Hey, if I mispronounce, please correct me," and make sure I get it right, right? Because I've seen sometimes off where we're calling a student the wrong name or mispronouncing it for the entire year, and they say, "Well, actually, this is how." And I'm like, "Man, I wish you said that earlier." But I think that relationship, that trust is very important. And again, this all contributes to the student's success at the school and beyond. And you develop these relationships, sometimes lifelong relationships. Can we go to the next best? So peer-to-peer relationships, and we spoke about this, and we saw some of this in the video. And I think one of the most important things is this idea of collaboration and teamwork, because we all know in our adult lives, this is something that we deal with day to day. Being able to work with our colleagues, being able to sometimes agree to disagree, but we are able to do this respectfully, right? So having those skill sets, those conflict resolution skills are extremely important. And when we think about creating this classroom environment, it's one thing to have that relationship with the teacher, but very important to have it with our peers. So some of the things that teachers can do to help foster this, and I think we touched upon this in some of the videos, is this idea of group work. And I think what this does is, and when we say group work, not just randomly counting off, which may work sometimes, but I think being intentional with how we create our groups. Sometimes you want to break up those friend groups and make sure that they're working with other people, have an opportunity to rotate. And I think this is important because when we do this through those groups, through the project-based learning, right? Through the turn and talks, we are essentially giving students those skill sets, the communication, the active listening, the conflict resolution. These are all very important skill sets that they need to learn in order to be successful, not just in high school, but college and beyond, or the workforce, right? So I think the other thing is when we're assigning these groups, again, being intentional, because every student should have an active role. And the point was mentioned earlier, what do we do if one student's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? So how do we resolve that, right? And I think this is something that's extremely important in these partnerships, peer feedback, being open to feedback from their peers. I think one of the things that some of my staff struggle with is the feedback, right? Sometimes it can be uncomfortable when you're getting constructive or some type of feedback, but I do think it's important. I was having a conversation earlier with some central office people, and they were saying how they strongly encourage feedback, and they called feedback a gift, right? So I think that's a different mindset. That's a shift to look at it as a gift to get this. So I think this is another important thing that through the peer-to-peer relationships, we begin to get these gifts and this feedback. And also, one of the things that at the high school, we have many clubs and activities. So we oftentimes, our staff will encourage students to participate in clubs and activities, and not just athletics, but we have all types of clubs. And just to be an active member of the school community. And again, this is all part and parcel of relationships, right? Being able to have these relationships with their peers, and again, have the ownership and a sense of belonging to the school community, which is extremely important, and it transcends beyond the classroom. Next slide. School family relationships, again, with teachers. This is something that can also start day one, or at the back to school night when we send out the communication with the expectations of classrooms. And then the other thing I think is important is to explain the why, the reasoning behind the grading practice, or the reasoning behind this policy in the classroom. Oftentimes students ask why. Sometimes, in my household, I say because I said so and I'm the parent. We can't necessarily say that in the classroom, but they want to understand why. So I think that's very important for them to understand. So back to school night, being able to talk, in the positive, in the student strengths, very important during conferences. The other thing is that what we want to do is I often recommend a positive communication within the first marking period, right? So we're not going to wait until a student maybe does something that wasn't very skillful and we have to, write that referral or make that phone call home. I always say to my teachers, you get a lot of juice cups and bonuses when you're able to send out that positive communication. It really goes a long way. And to know that, wow, this teacher is looking to support my student, to support my child, and has their best interest. I think that's one of the most important things. And we want to do right away, something that can happen in September. Again, that positive communication goes an extremely long way. Also, sometimes I encourage my students as part of our evaluation is to invite the parents in. Whether there's an expertise, and some say, well, what does that look like at the high school level, right? If there's a field of expertise or something that that may align with the curriculum, or even if we're observing a certain month, right? You may want to invite the parent in. I always say this is a way to connect. We want to engage with our parents and invite them in, and even so they can see what's in the classroom. Other things that we've done, math night. I have a small learning community. Most recently, they were writing bills, and they were going to debate bills. It's the Civics and Government Institute at my school, and parents often say, well, what does that mean? What does that even mean? What does that look like? So they invited them in. They had different classrooms, and the parents wrote bills. And then we came into our large group instruction room, and the parents kind of, went back and forth because they couldn't necessarily agree, believe it or not. But the students were able to facilitate the conversation and to make sure that there were rules that they could respectfully disagree. So they were modeling the behavior that we would want to see. So I oftentimes encourage staff to invite parents in. Again, the positive communication and be proactive with it, not when there's just a problem. And again, the invitation to invite families in when we can, so that they can see what's going on into the classroom.
Jeff, just a quick
Sure.
question. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to get also if you had any advice. Sue's question earlier is how to connect. So you've talked a lot about how staff connect with parents, and any advice you have for how parents can connect with staff to really understand what's happening like on a daily basis in school.
Absolutely.
So any tips or recommendations?
Absolutely. So I do know that there are opportunities depending on, the different schools. If to be added to, and we have several parents that are added to the classroom, the Google Classroom, or even they get a summary at the end of the week, right? So there are ways that teachers, if your school uses Google Classroom, that they receive a summary at the end of the week to see what is going on. And then the other thing is send emails. I think what I've seen happen is that sometimes in the beginning of the school year, parents will share, or teachers will ask parents to share, any expertise or anything, specialists or hobbies even that they would want to come in and be able to be a guest speaker, or even, to offer some type of master class on a particular topic. And the other thing I would encourage parents is to get involved with the PTA, get involved with the parent advisory if there's a school action team for partnership, or even to reach out to the teacher and say, how can I support? teachers love that, right? How can I support? Is there anything I can do? Maybe I'm able to connect you with, certain PD or maybe another speaker to come in, So I think those are ways that oftentimes teachers are very open to getting that support and that parental involvement.
And I think that's a really important point, just because I think sometimes we can feel very intimidated to talk to a teacher, right? But the idea that teachers actually really want to hear from us,
Absolutely.
is a really good point, because it could feel a little overwhelming and intimidating at times.
And the other thing is, teachers want parents to be involved because there's, studies will suggest that when you have parental involvement, right, it really contributes in a positive way to student achievement, student success, right? So again, we want to be able to have that back and forth communication with parents, and again, not just for bad things, but for the positive things as well. And we want parents to come in and to be able to be a part of the education, because again, all of that points to academic success, which is overall school success. So we definitely want to engage our parents in just about every possible way, right? For the best overall experience for our community. So that's something that I would encourage parents to do, definitely. Yes. So as we talked about the impact of relationships with schools, we touched upon the academic piece, the social, emotional, and behavioral. That's the other thing, right? So when you have this ongoing communication with parents, students are less likely to do things that they shouldn't, right? Because they know that there's this two-way communication. And again, the resilience, graduation rates, right? You touched upon that earlier, that this is just not while they're in the building, right? Or in the high school or in the school setting. This is for life beyond, right? We want them to be able to be faced with adversity, because we know that that is a part of life, but how to make sure that they have the skill sets to overcome that adversity and to continue to persevere. And I think this all is part and parcel of strong relationships. Again, teacher-student relationships, peer-to-peer, and most importantly, that family and school relationship is key.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. That
Sure.
was, yeah, such wonderful words of wisdom for educators and for parents. So thank you.
You.
So we're going to sort of enter into this last phase of our workshop tonight. I'm going to take us in a little bit of a different direction here, because one of the most important ways, and one of the best ways actually, to really understand how we operate in relationships is to really uncover our values. Because oftentimes, when we're living by our values, or where others are living by our values, it could feel really good. We can feel like things are working, things are positive, things are feeling really connected. And when we go against our values, or when others go against our values, it could feel really, really not good, really bad, and it can affect our relationships a lot. So, what I would actually like to do is an exercise with you, where we uncover our core values together. And I just wanted to share that core values, the definition of them, are fundamental beliefs that guide a person's behavior and decision making. So if you would take a look at the list here, and this is about a list of about 40 or so core values that I took from a list of over 100, but I just needed to fit it onto the screen. And without looking at each one too deeply, just looking and seeing if you could pick three of the values that you hold dearest to you. So we have achievement, helping others, honesty, integrity, appreciation, authenticity, belonging, caring. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you can see for yourselves. And think about it. You can, if you're an educator, you can think about this as professionally, like what are the three values that you hold most dear to you as a professional? Or you can think of it as a parent. What are the three values that you hold dearest to you as a parent? And what we'll do is, after you pick those three values, if you wouldn't mind writing them into the chat box. And then we'll talk a little bit about how they impact our relationships on the next slide. So, oh, Lanisha, you knew yours right away. Sometimes they just jump out at us, don't they? So Lanisha's are authenticity, responsibility, and growth. Lanisha, thank you so much for sharing those. If anybody else, sometimes it can take people like days to uncover their core values, and sometimes people know it in like 30 seconds. I always find it to be so interesting. Jessica, thank you so much. We have family, community, and meaningful work. Fantastic. Kari, perseverance, kindness, and truth. Jeff, integrity, equity, and kindness. Oh, everybody got them pretty quick. Andrea, kindness, caring, and helping others. Amazing. And Sue, oh, thank you all. Everybody contributed. Thank you so much. Helping others, kindness, and community. Um, So I want to share a little bit of a story about core values and why I find them to be so important. Um, I had a supervisor who I always felt when I brought her problems that she always kind of sugarcoated them. Like I would say, well, I'm having kind of a conflict, in this area of my work. And she would say, "Oh, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay, and it'll be fine." And I always felt kind of I didn't feel great after I left those meetings, just because I didn't feel like I was being taken into account or my problems weren't being into account. And then I did this core values exercise with her, and I found out that one of her core values is optimism. And she said, ever since I was a little kid, I could never help but thinking on the bright side of things. Like everything, I always know that something is going to be okay in the end. And it helped me so much. And so in that moment, I realized that she was just operating from one of her values, which was optimism. And so it helped our relationship so much. So instead of looking at her and thinking, oh, she's just sugarcoating all of the problems I'm bringing to her, I was like, she's just an optimist. And so, and so it really helped me to understand her core value, and it really helped me to bridge that relationship gap with her. So I want you to think about, so I just shared with you some of my core values, which are kindness, responsibility, and communication. And these are actually values that I bring to my family, and we have worked through them together. But I want you to think about what are some ways that you operate in relationships in your core values. So I'll just give an example. Communication is really important to me, and having clear communication is really important to me. So I make sure, before I send any email or before I, talk with somebody or before I, you know, talk to my children, that I'm really like taking a pause and making sure that what I'm saying is exactly what I want it to say. And sometimes, if I'm not communicating effectively, it could actually not feel so great for me. Um, Kindness is another one of my core values. And so I try to operate under kindness. It sounds like a lot of folks here also have the same core value of kindness, which is really nice. We're in a community of kindness here. And I don't know if you all feel this way, but like when I'm not operating out of kindness or someone else is not being kind to me, or I notice that children are not being kind to each other, it really, really, really upsets me. And it's because kindness is one of my core values. And then responsibility. So um, I make sure that I am acting out of responsibility in everything I do. Sometimes, of course, I'm not a perfect person, and so sometimes I'm irresponsible. But when I work with a group of kids or when I'm working with my own children and they're not showing responsibility necessarily, it could really affect me. And so it's helpful for me to know that it's because my value is so held dearly to me. So I want you to think about, and if you feel comfortable entering it into the chat, that what are some ways that you live by your core values when it comes to relationships? So what are some things that you do to show your kindness or equity or authenticity? I'd love to hear just a little bit more about sort of how you operate under your core values. And if you feel open to sharing it in the chat, that would be fantastic. And I would also say if you have an example of a time that you feel challenged because somebody is not operating under one of your core values, or you're not operating under one of your core values, and you want to share that example too, that would be fantastic. I would love to hear that as well. And the folks in the chat would, I'm sure, also love to hear it. I'll just give it a minute or two. Okay, Jeff, thank you for writing it, equity. So working to meet students where they are to provide what they need. So that's really how you're operating in your school and how you're connecting with students. And we've been talking a lot about the connected classroom. So equity is a value that you hold really true to you. And when things aren't equitable, I imagine that that's something that could be really challenging for you. Thank you so much for writing in. Anyone else have an example of how you live by one of your core values, especially when it comes to relationships? Or maybe an example of a time when your core value was not being met and how that could be challenging for you. We'll just wait another minute. Again, these are big questions. So if it's hard to write them into the chat, no worries at all. It's just a really good tool and kind of like a food for thought. So as long as you're thinking about it, that's totally okay. I'll wait just like another 30 seconds and then we'll move on. All right. So I'm going to move on just because I realize that this is a big question. And so maybe it's kind of hard to think of an example, but I encourage you to think of ways that you both live by and maybe sometimes how it could be challenging to not have others live by your core values. Oh, Lanisha, thanks for writing in. One of my core values is authenticity. I believe when you show who you are, believe them and meet them where they are. I love that. Thank you so much, Lanisha. And I know Lanisha and I can see how authenticity would be one of your core values. Oh, Andrea, thank you for chiming in as well. I often take time to bake and bring it to my office as well as bake for my friends just to say thinking of you and appreciating you. That's so lovely. Um, I'm sure everybody around you feels the same way. So that's your operating under your core value of kindness. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so actually, if there's still folks who want to share, oh, Sue, okay, it just took a few minutes. Sue, I'm doing some volunteering. I'm a Girl Scout leader for 2 troops. That's fantastic. So I think that seems like it falls under the all three of your core values, Sue, of helping others, kindness, and community. So that sort of encompasses all of that. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm gonna just continue on here. I'm going to actually pause for a moment because we've come to the end of our webinar here. And before we move in, I just wanted to open it up to any kind of questions or any thoughts before we finally close. So any questions for Jeff while we're here? Any questions for me? Any questions about core values? We'll leave the chat box open for a minute. Okay, so I hope that this was a meaningful webinar for you and that you took something from it. If you care to share, oh, Lanisha, thank you. Thank you for asking this question. At what age should we start talking about our kids about their core values? Lanisha, I would say any age. I'll just share that I have an 8.5-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so they're able to understand a lot of the words. But what you could do is you could even share, what are some ways that you want to feel in our family? Or what are some things that you want to, what are some things that are important to you about our family? And you can make a list of all of those things. And then you can put that, on your refrigerator. And as they get older, you can introduce them more to these words like, sorry, these sort of bigger words. So we did this recently, again, with an 8.5-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they were able to really understand and really narrow down the core values that they felt were really true to us and our family. And I think a really another positive experience with this is that you can also share with your family when they're not living by their core values, right? Like when my kids come home from school and instead of doing their homework, they jump on their iPad or they want to watch TV, we look at our core values and we say, are you acting out of like responsibility? Is this the most responsible thing you could do? And they don't have to be perfect all the time, but it's something we came up with together. So I think that's a fantastic question. And I would say you could start talking about it at any age and maybe just use vocabulary that feels comfortable, right? So, like, how do you want to feel in our family, or what's important to you about our family? And having that list posted and then revisiting it and kind of fine tuning it along the way. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions about core values or any questions for Jeff? We have about a few more minutes. And if you don't have a question and you're open to just sharing one takeaway that you had from this webinar, we would love to know. Again, feedback is really, as Jeff was mentioning before, so helpful. So we'd love to know how this resonated for you. If there's any little tidbit that you might be taking back with you to your family or to your school, please feel free to share in the chat box. We can take that with us for our next webinar. And Lanisha, if I didn't answer your question and you have another question, please feel free to ask it. I hope I did. Oh, thank you. Okay, and as you are entering just some of your takeaways, I'm just going to move us along to this next slide. So there's two links here that I think would be really helpful, and you will all be getting a copy of this presentation because you signed up with your email addresses, so you'll get the whole slide deck. But the organization that I mentioned here, Castle, is a huge hub for all social emotional learning. It has tons of information for parents, tons of information for educators. I highly recommend exploring it. And this second link here is a list a huge list of core values. So if you click on that, I'll actually just toggle my screen real quick and show you. Sorry. Let me just move this. I think you can see. So this is this link here will take you to all of these core values. And it's a really, positive thing to do with your family, with your students, with your, your colleagues. I would really highly recommend it. Let me get back to, okay, here we go. And with that, if there's no more questions, no more comments, we hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Again, this is a series that we're doing of social emotional learning series. So wherever you found out about this webinar tonight, keep looking and we'll have more webinars upcoming and we would love for you to come. I know Sue is a returning attendant, so it's so nice to see you again, Sue, and everyone else. Thank you so much for your attendance and your participation, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, Jeff. Thanks so much, Sue. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Andrea. Thank you so much for coming and participating.